So the B-29 and the P-51 Mustang are making their way onto the runway for their demonstration. I have been assured by the pilot of the B-29 that he is experienced in this aircraft and can indeed take off from this airfield. Usually the B-29 can take a crew of 11 people. However, this time they only have one, and they have stripped out all of the empty seats, as well as using the bare minimum amount of fuel. And up behind it we have the beautiful P-51 Mustang. As the P-51 lines up for the takeoff run. Before they take and put full power on all the aircraft and all the engines, with an accumulative horsepower of nearly 10,000 horsepower. And the Merlin engine inside of that P-51 to the 4 duplex Cyclone 18-cylinder radial engines inside the P-29. They perform the last of their pre-flight checks. The tower is clear for takeoff. As the B-29 launches itself into the air with ease using most of the runway. I think it's the landing that we have the problem with, but we shall see. I think if this one had a problem during landing, it would be slightly more expensive and more damaging to the airfield. So, as we mentioned, the B-29 has the 4 18-cylinder air-cooled radial engines, which gives it a maximum speed of 350 miles per hour. Although it can actually take a lot of fuel on board as well, with a range of 3,200 miles. This aircraft can fly from the United States all the way over into Germany during the Second World War to do any type of bombing runs. However, this aircraft was used more in the Pacific area. I've completely forgotten the name of the ocean. I know it's quite a large one. So, from the left now, we have the B-29 and the P-51 Mustang. The B-29 has a service ceiling of 31,000 feet. That's slightly more than the P-40 we've seen just before here now, and a little bit less than the Spitfire. But compared to the Mustang alongside of it, the Mustang actually has a service ceiling of 41, nearly 42,000 feet, making it one of the highest aircraft that we've got here today. That's piston powered. A lot of the jet aircraft have a high service ceiling as well. Of course, the B-29 was also famous for dropping the only atomic bombs onto another country. The silver plate version was the only one that could drop these atomic bombs. And those bombs are kept somewhere in the bomb bay, which you'll see on the path coming over now. We assure you there are none of these bombs in it today. The B-29 made its first flight on the 21st of September in 1942. It was then used in several different theatres of war, and was also used by several different countries, including the Royal Australian Air Force that used two former RAF B-29s. The Royal Air Force had 87 loaned from the United States Air Force as the Washington B-1. The United States had the United States Army Air Forces, the US Air Force, and the United States Navy. For former US Air Force aircraft that were designated as P-2B patrol bombers. The Soviet Union also had a B-29. In fact, they had three. Three United States Army Air Force B-29s had to make an emergency landing in the USSR during World War II. They were never returned. They were reverse engineered by the Soviets to make the Tupolev Tu-4 Bull. The Soviets were actually lended quite a few aircraft from the Royal Air Force as well. They were given 1,200 Supermarine Spitfires for a lend trial program in the Soviet Air Force. However, these aircraft were never returned, but one was only found recently. Its restoration has just been complete and is now flying in the United Kingdom out of Hangar 11 at somewhere in the UK. The airfield has completely gone out of my head. But either way, it is now based in the UK, and I can say that it is extremely strange to see a Spitfire with a Soviet star on the side. So the B-29 has got its undercarriage down, as well as the flaps to get it as slow as he possibly could, to make his landing here at former RAF Husbands Bosworth Airfield. The P-51 Mustang is giving a slight escort on the way in, before the Mustang then proceeds to do his own small display. This airfield, Husbands Bosworth, is, as I mentioned earlier, is a former RAF airbase. It was used in the Second World War as a training base for bomber pilots, home to the Wellingtons, as well as some Shackletons. There's not a lot of history on the airfield here. It was a satellite airfield of RAF Market Harbour, about 5 miles away down the road. And a very nice touchdown and landing from the B-29. And once again, thank you, Hornet, for the brilliant and fabulous display. But as we mentioned, it's not quite over yet. The Mustang is still in the air and will continue for a few more passes and do his own display. So, ladies and gentlemen, now if you look to the skies is the P-51 Mustang. This P-51, with the civilian registration of November 6306 Tango, was actually in World War II. It wasn't actually in service during World War II. It was taken on with the United States Army Air Force in 1945, and it was placed into storage. In 1948, it was redesignated as an F-51D. The F-51 meant fighter, and the P then later was redesignated as pursuit. Giving the top speed of the aircraft now down the runway from the right to left. Demonstrating the incredible superior speed of the P-51 Mustang. With a top speed of 440 miles per hour. That's about 50 miles per hour more than the Spitfire. And as previously mentioned, it has a service ceiling of 42,000 feet, which is absolutely incredible for a piston-powered aircraft. The 10th of January 1951, the aircraft was taken on with the Royal Canadian Air Force, and was then taken off of the Royal Canadian Air Force register in 17th of September 1957. The Mustang was actually originally designed to use an Allison V12 engine, which had limited high-altitude performance with its earlier variants. The aircraft was first flown operationally by the Royal Air Force as a tactical reconnaissance aircraft and fighter bomber. They replaced the Allison engine with a Merlin Rolls-Royce, which resulted in the P-51B and C Mustang models, and transformed the aircraft's performance in altitudes above 15,000 feet without sacrificing any range, allowing it to actually compete and fight against the German Luftwaffe bombers and fighters. Similar engine to the Spitfire, the V12 Merlin engine, however this one was built by Packard instead of Rolls-Royce, which means it was built on a factory line instead of hand-built by Bob and James down in Birmingham. In fact, it did actually have a little bit more power than the Spitfire, with full max military power at 1700 horsepower. And a beautiful performance and display from Indy in the P-51 Mustang. Now I want you to bear in mind the weight of this aircraft. This aircraft weighs 4,000 kilograms, that is 0.4 tons, and that is with all fuel, and that is the gross weight. So, I want you to remember that name for a display that we have later on. Remember that number? Sorry, not name. So there we have it. The P-51 is now parked up, ready to go back in the hangar.